Lieutenant Mira found the map by accident. The survey ship Alden drifted through a cold belt of broken rock and ice. The crew had thought the belt was empty. It was not on any modern chart. The ship's sensors called it a junk field. But Mira saw a glint inside an old navigation relay. She pulled the relay from a rack and opened it. The map inside was not like any map she had seen. It did not shine with bright trade routes. It did not show the usual lines that connect starports and lanes. It was simple. Where Earth should be, someone had written one word in a cramped, careful hand. Unexplained. The paper was thin and smelled of oil. There was a small smear of rust on the edge. When Mira held it to the light, she could see tiny marks that looked like old star positions. Someone had drawn a dark circle around one lane. The lane had no ships on it. It had no traffic. It had a black gap like a missing tooth. Mira felt a small chill. The relay hummed in her hands, and inside the hum was a tone that the ship's AI did not recognize. She unfolded a corner of the paper and found a short note folded into the seam. The note had one sentence in a slow, human hand. If you read this, we were here. Leave the lanes alone. She read the line out loud in the mess. The crew fell quiet. Jor, the ship's engineer, cupped the paper like it could break. He was old and had seen many strange things. Someone wanted to hide something, he said. Or someone wanted to hide from something. The captain tried to laugh. It is a relic, he said. Old fear. Old stories. But his smile did not reach his eyes. The crew ran scans. The map showed faint corridors of light, the kind used by thousands of traders and travelers. One corridor, the one circled, had no beacons, no radio traffic, no memory in the great catalogs. The gap looked like a place that time had skipped. At the edge of the gap, the ship's instruments did a small, sharp thing. A sensor ping returned a single blip that was not a ship. It was more like a breath. The AI played it in the common room. The sound made the coffee tremble in its cup. For a second, the lights on the ship dimmed. The crew felt a soft pressure in their chests as if someone had walked past. Mira kept the paper hidden in her jacket. She thought of the sentence again, leave the lanes alone. It was a warning. It was also a promise. People who wrote warnings could be afraid, or they could be brave. She wanted to know which. That night, Alden changed course. The captain agreed to a slow run along the edge of the dark lane. They moved with care. The ship felt smaller in that kind of quiet. The stars outside were very bright. They were sharp like knives. In the darkness between stars, a black gap yelled like an open mouth. A passing freighter crossed their path. Mira watched from the bridge as the freighter's crew checked their course and then shifted away. On an open channel, a voice said something in an old dialect. The word was simple and it was a command. Leave. The captain's face lost color. The freighter was not a friend to Alden, and the freighter did not stop to talk. It turned and went. The next morning, the ship found a small station on the edge of the lane. The station had not answered any hails for decades. Its metal skin was scraped and scarred. A heavy door, old and stiff with cold, sealed the entrance. The crew tried to open it. The lock did not move. Someone had put a small piece of chewed metal by the bolt. The metal looked like it had been bitten by something that was not a tool. Mira touched the chewed metal and felt the memory of it like a bruise. The vessel's history said nothing about this station. No official files. No registry. The crew took pictures and fed them to the AI. The AI searched old logs and came back with nothing. It returned a question mark. When they set a retrieval drone near the station, the drone's camera caught a flash. For a single frame, a shape passed behind the station. It was not a ship's shape. It was long and thinner than most things. It moved like something that remembered how to hide. Inside the relay, Mira found another fold in the paper. She did not show at first. She waited until the ship's watch was thin and sleepy, and then she read the last line under an emergency red light. The line was written in the same careful hand, and it felt like a small, brave strike against the dark. If they come, tell them we left a note. Mira could not sleep. She held the paper like a small child might hold a toy in the dark, tight enough to keep it from blowing away, loose enough to feel its shape. She wanted to tuck it away where no one would find it. She wanted to tell the crew everything. Instead, she kept it close to her heart. In the middle of the night, the ship's alarm sang a soft, strange song. The bridge sprang to life. Instruments showed a blip far inside the black gap. The AI tried to classify it and failed. Then the speakers answered with a voice. It was not a recording. It was a live voice that knew Myra's name. The voice was slow. It used a man's old tongue, not in greeting but in question. It asked one thing only, with a hollow in it that was almost a wound. Why did you come? For a moment the ship hung between two choices. It could turn away. It could hide the paper back into the relay and burn the map. It could fold and go home, rich with a relic and poor in answers. Or it could move closer into the dark and ask why. Mira pressed the paper to her lips. She thought of the smear of rust, the chewed metal, the freighter's one-word warning, the old hand writing a single brave sentence. She ordered the course change. The ship angled toward the gap. The stars seemed to lean away. On the edge of the black lane, the station's lights flickered. The dark opened like a throat. The last thing the crew saw before the hull became tight with a new kind of cold was a paper in Myra's hand, and the line she had not yet spoken aloud. If they come, tell them we left a note. When the voice on the channel spoke Myra's name, the bridge went very quiet. The voice was old and flat, like someone who had not used their mouth for a long time. It was human. That made the whole ship tremble. Captain Ray ordered a cautious course into the black gap. The relay's map had thin numbers carved into the margin. The numbers matched a place deep in the shadow, a cold world with a thin, frozen sea. The Alden moved like a careful animal. The crew watched every readout. Every small light on the console felt important. They found the satellite first. It drifted very close to the planet, half buried in cloud and ice chips. Its paint peeled. Someone had once stenciled a label on its side, Earth Archive, classified. The antennae were bent like broken hands. No registry answered their hail. Mira sent a soft ping. The satellite whispered back with an old signal. The feed started slow. For a moment there was only static and a small, shaking light. Then a small video loaded. A cramped room, a low desk, a child's fingers pressing a folded note to the lens. The child looked at the camera with large, earnest eyes. There was fear in the face, but also a brave calm. The child held up the paper. On it someone had written, in a child hand and a careful adult hand on the edge, "We left a note, so you would not find us by map. If you find us, do not show the lanes." The video stilled. The child's lips moved. Mira turned up the sound. The voice was small and clear. "If you are listening, promise you will not tell them. Promise you will not sell the lanes. Promise you will let us sleep." The crew watched the child and felt the room in their chests tighten. How many had kept such a promise? How many had planned to break it? Then the satellite did something no archive should do. An emitter lit in its hull. A pulse, slow and regular, came from inside it. The pulse matched no engine signature. The AI compared to old logs and finally labeled a heartbeat. Not a ship, not a machine. A living rhythm. Joy, the engineer, touched the screen. "This is impossible," he said. His hands shook. Mira ordered a retrieval drone. The drone docked with shaking clip and forced a hatch open. Inside the module they found a tiny capsule, wrapped in thick cloth and sealed with resin. Its shell had long been scarred by space dust. When they cracked it open, there was a disc no bigger than a coin. Names were carved into it in small, neat strokes. One of the names made Myra's breath stop. It was a family name she had heard once in an old bedtime story. The name her grandmother used when she spoke of a hidden house on the edge of the world. The disc was not a map of stars. It was a map of people. Tiny symbols showed shelters under ice. Trade words scratched into stone. A list of those who had kept watch. A note in a looping hand explained alliances made in secret. One name on the list matched the speech pattern carved in the relay. The Lorn. The Lorn were a myth. Traders told stories of them in smoky bars. Creatures with glass eyes and no mouth. They did not speak with sound. They traded silence for shelter. The story said the Lorn kept secrets in her eyes and swallowed promises as payment. Mira read the lines and felt something like a door move inside her. The ship's AI flagged a deep pulse under the ice. The planet sent a low-frequency beat that matched the satellite's emitter. It was not machine pulse. It was a song, slow and long. It made the ship's lights throb. Below, through the clouds, something moved. The ice cracked in a straight, clean line. The crack grew like a seam being opened. A faint glow came from the fracture. The feed showed a hole in the frozen sea. The water under did not steam. It glowed with lights like a sleeping city. A second voice reached them on the channel. It was older than the child, craggy with time. It spoke in the same old tongue, but used a different rhythm. The voice asked simply, "Will you tell her what you know?" Mira felt the weight of that question. If she told, the lanes would fill. Traders and empires would come. The promise written by a child, the coin of names, the Lorne Treaty, all would become bargains on a market. If she stayed silent, the people under the ice might sleep another century. She thought of the freighter that had warned them. She thought of the chewed metal by the station bolt. She thought of the child's small hand on the camera. Outside, a strange craft moved into orbit over the planet. It were no known flag. Its silhouette was long and thin. The Alden's alert chimed. A message flashed in red on their screen. Do not interfere with quarantine systems. The message did not come from a registry or a court. It came from a voice older than law. The warning carried the weight of patrol fleets and memory. The Alden could obey and slip away into safety, or it could descend and break a promise that had been kept for generations. Mira slid the coin-shaped disc into her palm. The names on it were warm, as if the metal held a memory. The child's eyes in the video seemed to look at her again. The thin voice in the satellite said only one more thing before the feed went dark. If they come, tell them we left a note. They will listen to the note. The hull whispered under their feet. Jor looked at Mira with tired eyes. Captain Ray rubbed his jaw. The crew waited for an order. Mira stepped to the window and looked at the glowing seam in the ice. The lights beneath moved like the slow turning of a watch. For a second she thought she saw shapes, long structures with lights like seasons. Then the feed broke, and only the Black Sea remained. Mira put the paper back into her jacket. She chose a word without asking the ship. We descend. The decision hung in the cabin like a bell that will not stop ringing. Engines warmed. The Alden turned its belly toward the planet. Below, in the thin room on the video, the child's hand closed into a fist. On the screen, a new line crawled across the paper as if an invisible pen had written it. If they come, tell them we left a note. The engines thumped. The ship slipped into the night. Outside, the crack in the ice widened. Something bright moved under the water and turned its face toward the sky. And part two of the radio picking up one more sound. A human laugh, very soft, very old. Then a second voice that was not human at all, whispering in a language that made the bones ache. The Alden fell through night, like a small bird dropping into a deep well. Engines sang low. The hull warmed. Outside the small windows, the crack in the ice grew larger and larger. A soft blue light bled up from below. The stars above leaned away from the glow. Mira felt the ship in her ribs. Every step to the control felt heavy and true. The crew strapped in. Jor checked the landing clamps for the third time. Captain Ray watched the readouts with a face that had no comfort left. They broke through the last skin of ice with a soft shudder. Cold air rushed in, and then the cold left. The Alden settled on a plane of glass, ice so clear they could see into the deep. Below the glass the ocean breathed and moved like a sleeping beast. Lights moved under the water. They were not random. They were lines, pad structures. A drone slid out on a tether. It dropped through the broken hole and floated above the water. Its camera showed towers under the ice. The towers were not metal and not stone. They were grown things. They had windows that glowed like eyes. Something in the shapes made Mira think of ribs and of gardens. The drone caught movement near one tower. A set of long arms folded across a face. The arms were glass and soft. A pair of eyes opened like two moons. The eyes reflected the drone light and then fell back to darkness. From somewhere under the plane came a sound. It was not speech. It was like a hand moving across the strings of a harp. The ship's AI translated the pattern into words the computer knew. It offered a rough shape, curiosity, then a question, then a warning. The old voice that had spoken them on the channel came through again, but this time the sound rode the hull like someone pressing their palm to the ship. It said one phrase in that old tongue that Jor could almost remember from the stories. Eyes do not tell all. We listen. Mira put her hand against the glass floor. The cold bit through cloth. She felt nothing but the quiet. The child in the video had asked for a promise. Mira held that promise in her mouth, like a small coin. The ship could leave and keep the coin, or it could break it for something bigger. A shape rose from the water. It moved slow and sure. When it broke the surface, it did not splash like a fish. It slid like a shadow learning to be a thing. It took the form of a face against the other side of the clear ice. It had eyes like glass. It had no mouth, but the face was not empty. The face watched with careful interest. On the bridge, the crew gasped. The captain lost color. The Lorn, if that was what they were, lifted one hand. The hand had long fingers like the branches of a coral. The fingers tapped the glass in a rhythm. The rhythm answered the ship's heartbeat. The AI tried to copy it and failed. Then the glass of the plane near the hull blurred. Something touched it from below and left a mark. It looked like letters carved in frost. The letters melted into light and then rearranged. The pattern meant one thing over and over. Promise. Mira spoke first. Her voice was small. We promise, she said. The words felt wrong and too large. She did not know whether the Lorn would hear the sound or the promise spelled in the frost. The Lorn did not use words like humans. They used images and heart movements. The ship's AI caught the shapes and offered meaning. The Lorn had given humans shelter once. They had traded silence for safety. The Lorn had kept a list of names on the disk because eyes remember differently than paper. Their memory was slow, but it was true. A second craft moved above the plains. It was a silhouette the Alden had seen before. It hovered like a bird of prey. A red light blinked on its side. A voice, cold and formal, came through the ship's open channel. It said in a tone that smelled like law, "This system is under quarantine. Leave immediately or be detained." The crew froze. Captain Ray's jaw clenched. The Lorn on the other side of the ice lifted a hand, and the light in their eyes went low like a warning lamp. The red light above answered with a pattern. Authority. The ship had no registry that could argue with authority. Authority carried ships. Mira remembered the child's promise again. She thought of the names on the coin. She thought of the little hands that had folded a note and hoped someone would keep it. She thought of her grandmother's stories. The decision did not come with comfort. It came with a weight. She turned to the crew. "We will not tell," she said. Her voice did not tremble. Her chest did. "We will not speak for them without their say." The captain opened his mouth. He had a list of reasons to obey the warning. He had charts that said fines and courts and 1,000 small things that make life easy. But he also had a face the crew would remember. He nodded once. "Then we keep the promise," he said. Below, the Lorn tapped the glass again. The pattern this time was not just promise. It was a small story. It showed a child running with a folded paper. It showed someone hiding the map in a relay. It showed a hand that placed metal near a lock. It showed a long silence. It asked one thing in form and feeling. Trust? As the Alden prepared to depart, the red light above them flashed a third time. A small drone detached and drifted down with a slow, indifferent spin. It stopped at the edge of the crack and scanned. The drone's voice was mechanical and clear. "Be advised. This sector will be surveyed in 3 rotations." 3 rotations. The words landed like distant thunder. If that drone reported, the lanes would not stay empty. Traders would come. Memory would turn to maps and then to markets. The child's promise might be lost. Mira tightened her hand on the paper. The Lorn watched. The planet hummed under the ice. In the dark water, something larger than a city moved slowly toward the crack. It was old. It was slow. It had not woken in full for centuries. The Alden rose. Captain Ray set a course that did not point straight home. It pointed to a quiet place between stars. The ship would hide the coin and the paper. They would burn any full copy of the relay, but they could not hide what they had seen inside their heads. As the hull cleared the ice, the Lorne left a final sign on the glass. The frost arranged itself into a single word that any human could read. Remember. Mira held the paper and pressed it to her heart. The ship slipped into the black lane. Behind them, the red drone hummed away. Ahead, the lanes waited like old promises. The note in Myra's jacket seemed to pulse as if it had a small living thing inside. For a long minute, no one on the bridge spoke. Then a soft sound came from the speakers. It was a child's laugh again. It was older and clearer. Then, under it, a voice not human at all filled the channel. It said one thing in a tone that went through the ship like wind. They keep notes. They keep promises. But some promises age like wounds. Be careful how you open them. The Alden turned its nose and left. The light under the ice dimmed and pulled away. The plane closed like a lid. The ship carried away a secret that wanted to be loud. The galaxy above waited, hungry and unaware. The Alden slid from the black gap, like a small fish leaving a reef. The ice plane closed behind them. The red drone drifted away, and the seam healed. Inside the ship, the crew moved slow. They felt older. They smelled of cold and salt and a secret. They did not fly straight home. Captain Ray chose a quiet port on a back route. It was a place with few eyes and many closed doors. The captain wanted time to think. Mira wanted time to hide the coin and the paper. Jor wanted time to find a buyer. Jor had changed on the trip back. The cold had not left his shoulders. He kept checking the disc in his locker. He turned it in his hand like a man turning a coin that might open a door. To Jor, the names on the disc were not only memory. They were value. People paid for secrets. People bought silence and sold safety. At the port, the Alden tied to a gray dock. The market there was small and honest and hungry. It had traders who dealt in ship parts, old maps, and rumors. Most of them did not ask where a map came from. They only asked how much. Mira walked the market once. She kept the paper in her jacket. The child's words lived warm against her skin. Promise you will not tell. She watched faces. She watched eyes move like tiny maps. She felt a thin fear like someone brushing past her in a crowd. Meanwhile, Jor talked to a man named Hask. Hask was a broker. He wore old chains as if they were medals. He smiled like someone who had eaten many small lies. He wanted the disc. He loved names and lists. He said he could sell it to a collector on the far rim. He named a number that made Jor's breath quicken. Jor thought of how many repairs the Alden needed. He thought of his old bones and a future that might be easier. He thought only a little of the child's hand. He thought more of the coin. That night, he met Hask in the back room. Hask kept his face in shadow. Hask kept a small scanner and a quick tongue. Hask did not ask many questions. He asked two things. Show the coin and tell no one. Jor saw a way forward. He left with a small crate of parts and a promise that he would bring the disc the next day. Mira did not know. She slept fitfully. The promise in her jacket weighed at her heart. She woke at dawn and went to Jor's locker. The disc was gone. The coin hole in the cloth felt empty. Her mouth went dry. She ran to the captain. Captain Ray's face had the red lines of a man who sleeps too little. He did not know where Hask kept his deals. The captain trusted the crew. Trust was thin in that port. Myra's footsteps fell fast. She found Hask's stall empty. A trader there said Hask had left in the night to meet a buyer who came on a small courier. No one saw the buyer. No one saw the craft that waited in the fog. Mira felt the world tilt. She wanted to scream. She wanted to hunt. She wanted to stop a man who would sell a promise like meat. Instead, she pulled the ship away from the dock and set course for open lanes. The Alden had to move before word left the market. They were too slow. 3 rotations after the red drone had scanned the ice plane, a patrol cut across their path. The cutter came like a blade. It carried the plain gray of law and the bright teeth of guns. Its messages were cold and quick. You are identified. You are to land for inspection. The cutter knew the Alden's registry. It knew who had touched what. It asked for manifest, crew papers, cargo list. Hask's buyer was already at work. Traders who fed on secrets moved faster than men who kept them. Captain Ray tried to stall. He offered papers and patience. The cutter hummed. Its captain's voice held no mercy. It had orders, old orders, orders that could break small ships and erase small promises. The cutter had the weight of fleets behind its tone. Mira stood on the bridge and thought of the Lorne under the ice. She thought of the child who had begged for sleep. She thought of Jor and his quick eyes. She thought of the promise that had now been traded like a coin in a market. Every step of trade made the world smaller for the hidden people. The cutter moved in. It would not wait for legal slow things. A small drone slammed into the Alden's hull. It did not break skin, but it was a messenger. Its drive burned a line of light and left a tag on the ship. The tag read, "Inspected, report pending." On a distant channel, a murmured string of calls went out. Names and coordinates flew like small birds. The market had teeth that could bite a world. In the sudden press of danger, a freighter came from a fog. It bore the same quiet flag as the freighter that had warned them in the gap. It moved like a friend or a thief. The freighter's deck was scarred. Its captain wore the same old dialect as the first voice that said leave. The freighter hailed them. Its captain had eyes that had seen long roads. He spoke to Captain Ray in a low voice. "You carry something that is not for sale," he said. "They will take it. They always take it." Mira watched the freighter like a spark in the dark. The captain spoke of a network. The network moved in shadow. They called themselves keepers. They kept maps and people and promises. They hid the lanes. They broke no laws for profit. They broke many laws for sleep. The Alden's captain wanted options. The cutter had orders. The cutter would wait 3 transmissions and then act. The freighter's captain offered one small choice: hand over the disc to the keepers and run, or try to fight a legal machine and lose everything. Jor arrived then, pale and quick. He had Hask with him. Hask's face was gone like a mask dropped in a fight. He said he had a buyer. He said the buyer would have kept the list safe. He wanted the parts they had agreed on. He wanted a life better. But his voice shook. Before anyone could do more, the cutter's channel lit with a new voice. It was not from Law. It was a voice thin and high. It said one strange thing: "We found your note. We will check its truth." The Alden's engines burned. The captain chose the only path he had left. He set the ship to run, and he tuned the course toward the freighter's hidden lane. The cutter moved a block. Sparks of light bloomed between ship and cutter. Mira gripped the rail. The paper in her jacket pressed warm to her chest. She felt, suddenly, how small one paper could be and how large a market could make it. She had thought promises were simple. She had thought notes were words. She had not thought of law and hunger. As the Alden slipped toward the freighter's safe route, a shadow fell over their course. It was not the cutter. It was a long, thin shape that moved so close they saw no flag. It drifted behind them like a question. On the bridge, the AI whispered a new line that had not been in any file. Its voice was the same tone that had answered in the gap. It said softly and with something like pity, "The note calls, others answer." End part 4. The Alden burned toward a narrow lane. The cutter closing and unknown watchers waking. The coin is lost. The promise is a trade good now. Mira holds a paper and wonders if promises can survive a market. The Alden burned down the narrow lane like a wounded animal. Behind them, the cutter glowed like a hungry tooth. Ahead, the freighter's shadow opened a thin throat that led to safety, if they could reach it. The cutter closed the gap with a hard, law-given patience. On the bridge, Mira felt the ship tilt and groan. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced. The paper in her jacket felt heavier than anything metal. It held a child's plea, a disk of names, and a promise that had already been sold once. Now markets and law both hunted that small paper. Jor stood at her shoulder. He looked older than the trip had any right to make him. He had Hask's crate in his locker and guilt in his face. Hask had fled when the cutter came too near. The buyer had taken the coin, and then the buyer had vanished into the market. Jor had only one thing left, his regret. The freighter's captain came on the channel again. His voice was soft and flat. "We will open for you," he said. But not to hand it to law. You must hand it to keepers. You must let it leave this world to sail. Captain Ray's eyes found Mira. The choice split like a fork. Obey the cutter and face the legal machine that would turn names into lists. Or trust a freighter in an older, darker network that moved in shadow for sleep, not for profit. Mira thought of the Lorne under the ice. She thought of how the child had begged to be left alone. She thought of her crew, their lives, their debts, their future. She looked at Jor and saw the coin shine in his empty hands. "Take us in," she said. Her voice was low. "Hand it to the keepers. We do not want blood. We want a promise kept." The freighter turned and opened a narrow pass. Its hull was full of scars that read like a map of choices. The cutter hummed a warning. On the screen, an unknown shape moved at the edge of sensor range. It matched no registry. As the Alden slipped inside the freighter's safe throat, a small craft duffed the cutter and locked onto them. The cutter would not let a thing go without a fight. Metal flashed. The freighter answered with smoke and a jamming song that made sensors cough. For a moment, all three ships hung in space like animals circling over meat. Then the smaller craft broke away. It had no flag. Its intent was clear. Take the ship, take the secret. A cold hand gripped the throat of the Alden with specialized ropes. The hull shivered. On the cutter's channel, a voice barked legal commands. The freighter countered with old codes known only to those who keep lanes closed. The freighter's captain spoke in the old dialect again. He offered a trade no market could price. The names would not go to law. They would go to the keepers. In return, the Alden would sail free and erase every trace of the relay from their ship. Jor's face hardened. He stepped forward. "I sold it," he said, and the words tasted like rust. "I will fix it. I will fix what I broke." He described where the coin had gone. He told them the buyer met on the fog docks and boarded a courier flag to a merchant house with a soft face. The freighter's captain cursed softly and then nodded. There was a plan forming, one of those plans that were not neat but did the work. In the tight hour that followed, the Alden and freighter danced. The freighter let the cutter think it had their prey. It threw false traces and false manifests. The cutter chased ghosts. The small flag craft that tried to snatch them got tangled in a net and drifted away, its pilot furious and alone. By the time the cutter realized the mistake, the Alden and freighter were leaving the choke lane. Sensors showed the courier heading another way. The market teeth could not bite what they could not find. On the freighter, in a small room full of maps stitched into cloth, Jor handed over the disc to a woman who smelled of old wood and cold rain. She was thin and quiet. Her hands were stained with ink. She took the coin and looked at the names. Her face did not change. She folded the coin into a pocket in her coat, and then, in a move that made Jor's knees feel light, she slid the coin under a pile of maps and then fed the maps to a small furnace. The metal glowed and then became something else. The name list unmade itself. Mira watched all of it. The child's paper still lay against her heart. She needed to do one final thing. She took a clean sheet and wrote with a steady hand. She wrote not names, not coordinates. She wrote one line and folded it into the relay the freighter had carried. "We were here. Leave the lanes alone." She added a second, smaller line on the back. "If you find this, remember why." The keepers took the paper and the coin and promised to hide them where a market could not reach. They would trade the story of the Lorne only in whispers, and only to those who would not sell sleep for profit. They would watch the edges of lanes and the scars on stations, and they would answer when someone left a note. They would be cruel sometimes. They would be kind others. They were not law. They were not market. They believed sleep had worth. When the Alden finally cleared the freighter's throat and saw open stars, Captain Ray exhaled in a long, small breath. The crew felt like men who had carried water uphill and finally reached a small pond. Jor sat down and put his head in his hands. He had lost a coin, and he had found something better, a small piece in a choice. He did not yet know if the keepers would be kind or cruel with what they now held. He only knew he had not sold the child's sleep for parts. Mira folded the child's paper and tucked it back into the relay she kept in a small chest. She could not burn it. She could not let it fly into markets again. She would guard it. She would teach others to guard. The star lanes were wide and hungry. Secrets had a cost. As the Alden sailed on, the last thing that rose on the bridge was not fear. It was a promise. It was small and fragile and maybe foolish. Mira pinched the paper and smiled a little. She spoke aloud, not at anyone in particular. We keep notes. We keep promises. Far below, where ice held watch, something moved in the dark water. A light blinked like an old eye closing. Above them, the star map still bore its quiet label, Unexplained. Some things a galaxy cannot name. Some things a galaxy must not wake. Mira watched the stars and kept a small secret in her hand. The quiet remained. For now,